Welcome back, minors. My name is Nathan Asbell, and I'm a professional counselor here at Student Wellbeing.
And my name's Amber Johnston. I'm also a counselor here at Student Wellbeing, and it's time for your morning cup of joe.
All right, Amber, so what have you brought for us today?
Well, last time we went over unhealthy relationships and in film and TV that have been idealized. And so this time I wanted to talk about relationships in film that were healthy and deserve a little bit more attention.
Awesome. Yeah, that last podcast was quite horrifying, actually. So it's good to see we're going to have the flip side to that.
Yeah. So love stories, these are not flashy love stories per se, but these relationships embody healthy goals. Not maybe every aspect, but they're definitely working on it and trying to become better and show some real positive traits.
Right.
So the first one I want to mention is from one of my favorite shows, and I think it's one of yours too, and that's Wash and Zoe from Firefly.
Yeah, take my land, take everything, but you can't take the sky from me. Let's go.
So Wash and Zoe are married when the series starts, and they live on this ship, and that's basically, if you've not seen Firefly, it's pretty much cowboys in space.
Yeah, it's a transport ship, and they're smugglers, and they're working together, and they get jobs, and they go about. In fact, one of my favorite lines is when one of the characters says, "Shiny, let's be bad guys," as he pulls out his gun to go rob a bank. It's on a world, and it's awesome.
I swear by my pretty floral bonnet, I will end you.
Right, absolutely. Absolutely. Oh, there's so many great one-liners in the movie. I swallowed a bug. I love that one.
Yes, it's a fantastic show, but it's basically a Western set in space, and Wash is the pilot of the ship, and Zoe is I guess you call her first mate?
She is the first mate.
Okay. And so they're married, and they start out the series as married, and they end the series as married. And they're showing a lot of affection for each other, loving communication. There's a lot of physical affection that isn't sexual, like hand-holding, kissing, flirting, that's not sexually based. It's not goal-orientated. It's just affection for each other.
He'll sit in the pilot's seat, and she'll come up behind him and touch him and talk to him and be there with him. It's quite lovely and romantic, and it's very wholesome, the love they have for one another. And it's a beautiful thing. It's the sign of what a healthy relationship would look like, where people voluntarily want to be together and they want to be close and touch each other, because we know by research that closeness is a form of acceptance. And so that constant acceptance between them is a wonderful thing.
And physical touch is also a love language for a lot of people, and not necessarily sexual touch, but physical touch in general, which includes hugging, touching somebody's arm, all of those things, in addition to anything else. It's a way that people show affection.
What's interesting about Wash and Zoe is that at one point in the series, Wash gets jealous of Captain Malcolm Reynolds because Malcolm Reynolds and Zoe fought in the War for Independence together, and they were combat partners, basically combat mates, and they were very close. They scheme, because they're about doing naughty business, being basically space pirates, cowboys, and cowgirls. But he gets jealous of their closeness and jealous of that relationship. But what's interesting is that they eventually confront it, and they work through it, and towards the end of the series, and even into the subsequent movie, he's no longer jealous, and him and Zoe, Wash and Zoe that is, are really tight, and they're really close together. And the jealousy is just out of the love that he has for Zoe, and they were able to work through it and past it as a couple, and him and Malcolm Reynolds work past it as well.
And you should note that Malcolm Reynolds is played by Nathan Fillion.
And Wash is played by Alan Tudyk. And so just two great actors that are very funny. The whole show has great chemistry.
Absolutely.
Summer Glau's in it. I can't know if I can say this. Baccarin's in it. Can't think of her first name, but she did a really great job. Jewel State's in it. She plays the mechanic. And Baldwin, what's his name? I can't think of his first name, but Adam Baldwin plays a man named Jane Cobb.
Yes.
One of the best episodes.
There's a whole song.
Yes, and does my hat look cunning?
Yes.
And I actually have a replica of that hat.
Do you?
And a Fighting Elves shirts with the Chinese thing says on the front.
I have the bag.
So I want to, like one year my brother just dressed up as Jane Cobb for Halloween. It was the best ever. And we just, I wish I'd brought some grenades the whole night. It was awesome because that's one of his lines. He's the bruiser of the group, the heavy, carries all the guns. Mm-hmm. He's the guy that'll punch you out. I mean,
but he's the enforcer. A little eccentric.
And he's a little dumb.
Yes.
Let's just be honest, he's dumb. but he's just dumb. But he's great. He's great comedic relief, and so we really like him.
Absolutely. So my next example is from another one of my favorite shows, and that's Chandler and Monica in Friends.
Ah, Friends.
Mm-hmm. I grew up with Friends on TV. Like, I was in high school and that was on, not to date myself or anything.
No, I'm not a big Friends fan, but I can see how Chandler and Monica in Friends would be a good relationship.
Well, everyone likes to highlight Ross and Rachel, the will they, won't they, back and forth of that. And like we talked about last time, Ross and Rachel really were not healthy because they did a lot of stuff to just kind of hurt each other. Not listening, not communicating, just intentionally not being very nice to each other. Chandler and Monica are a different story. They have been friends for a really long time, and they're supportive and encouraging of each other. They talk about things that in an appropriate manner, and they don't keep big secrets from each other like Ross and Rachel do. And
they try to support each other whenever they get a chance. I mean, and when they adopted the kids at the very end, mm-hmm. They were super supportive of one another, and I thought that was a beautiful moment in the show. The speech that he gives to the adoption agency about what a great mother that Monica would be, I tear up every single time. Beautiful. So they not only love each other, but they also deep down like each other, and that's what makes them such a great couple. My next example is Randall and Beth in This Is Us. Talk about some emotional maturity. Those two in this show, it always impresses me the level of emotional maturity that those two show. They are honest with each other. Randall is very logical and very fact-orientated, and Beth is more of a free spirit, but they're able to communicate their needs with each other effectively. Does that mean that they don't fight? Absolutely not. They have some knockdown dragouts, but they're able to really voice what they're feeling and be honest. Not cruel, but honest, even when it hurts. Right, and I think that that's a hallmark of a good marriage is you're going to have disagreements, arguments, and even fights mm-hmm. if you're two people that have any passions in your life whatsoever. Mm-hmm. And so as a therapist, I sometimes hear couples say, we've been married for 15 years and never had a fight. So I look at them and I think to myself, maybe which one of you is the doormat? Right. Because if you both are passionate people, and if you have any kind of differences, then those differences will come up. And I think it's the way that they're dealt with that makes a difference. In fact, researcher John Gottman stated that it really doesn't matter whether or not a couple fights. It matters how they fight and their attitude towards one another when they fight. So people who are disagreeing based on facts and emotions and they're having that discussion versus someone who holds their spouse in contempt. Right. And that's a very different story. And so with Four Horsemen. The Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse. Highly recommend John Gottman to anyone who wants to know what a healthy relationship looks like. That's a great read. He is wonderful. He's the foremost marriage researcher. And I think, if I recall correctly, reading one of his books, that he can watch a couple and know mm-hmm. with over a 90% certainty whether or not they'll be married in 5 years or not. Yeah. He said 20 minutes. 20 minutes in the room with a couple, and he can dictate whether they'll still be married in 5 years. He could tell. He could predict it. And it's like, it's not magic. It's science. I know what causes people to get divorced. And so he's able to see what their relationship will look like in 5 years and whether or not they'll be together. So when you look at This Is Us and that particular aspect between those two, that couple, they fight, they argue, but they're not shaming one another. They're not degrading one another. They're not stonewalling. They're not calling each other out in such a heinous way. It's respectful, it's good communication, they passionately disagree, but then they're able to continue to love each other and work through it.
That's exactly it. There is, even when the honesty is brutal and painful, it's there and it comes from a place of love. And calling somebody out because they're doing something that's inconsistent with their values and being honest with it, it's just wonderful.
I mean, it's what everybody would hope for if we're honest and we really want to improve in life. That's the kind of spouse you want. Someone who could say, hey, Nathan, you are being a bit hypocritical in this area, and I know that's not what you believe in, and I love you, and I just wanted to bring that to your attention because I know that you want to change and become a better man. And I'd be like, yeah, thanks, babe. And
that's the nice version of their fights, but basically.
but I mean, yeah. I mean, granted, my wife, and I don't always. It's not always the neat, clean way. My wife and I are both therapists, and it's hilarious when we get into arguments. We have a rule: don't therapize each other while we're arguing, and so it's kind of a funny thing. But it's basically that we just have to sit there and work things out, and we talk to each other. Hey, I don't like it when you do this. Hey, I don't agree with you the way that you handle that situation with our son. And we can have a conversation and work through it. But it takes time, it takes mutual respect, it takes those things that John Gottman talks about, not bringing in the four horsemen, showing respect, being open, taking a break if you need it, having good communication. If you disagree passionately, that's great. Work through it in a mature and responsible way. And if it doesn't go well, one of the things that he talks about doing is afterwards do a post-action kind of, where you said pretend like you're watching the argument like a play and call yourselves out for, I should not have said that. That was rude of me, dear. I'm so sorry. And I always kind of think of it as the Muppets, the two critics up there. Look what you said there! Whoa! Just kind of, boy, that was really dumb. I wish you showered over. And like you can kind of criticize.
Walter, and what's the other one's name?
I can't remember, but they're really funny, and that's what I think of every time I hear Gottman say that. Is like, I can go back, rewind the argument, and hit play on the button and watch it, and we can sit there and go, wow, I was being a jerk. I'm really sorry, babe. And we can sit there and just talk about how we could have handled that disagreement better in a more more responsible way. I should have taken a break at that point. I was becoming emotionally overwhelmed. And when I do that, sometimes I lash out, and so I should have stopped. So having that post-conversation, I think, is important. And you'll see that in the healthier couples and TV shows. You'll see them resolve conflict afterwards. They'll say, I shouldn't have come to you in that moment. I knew you were upset. Your father had just died. Or whatever scenario it is, I should have waited. I should have picked a better time.
Right.
I should have been more respectful. And that's also a good sign of a healthy relationship. Maybe the argument didn't go well, but the way we apologize and the way that we handle it afterwards and the way we commit to positive change also makes a big difference. So sometimes, like for example, when you see like the first one, Wash gets jealous of Malcolm Reynolds, he and Zoe have to work through that and pass that jealousy. And so it's a good thing.
So my next example is Jim and Pam in The Office.
The Office. Classic. So
this relationship has its up and downs, and there was a lot of seasons of will they or won't they. However, in the end, they ended up having a relationship that was rooted in a deep and solid friendship and mutual respect. And again, like the other examples, they show some genuine affection and liking towards each other. Now, there was some drama where I believe he had an affair in the later seasons, but they seem to have recouped from it.
I don't think it was an affair. I think it was like he was considering it, and it ended up being that no. I know the writers of the show were talking about them possibly breaking up and getting a divorce and so forth, but the fans found out and they were like, no, Jim and Pam forever, and so they weren't able to continue on with that. So anyway.
So my next one is Morticia and Gomez and the Addams Family.
Wow, that is a crazy show.
So everyone always talks up Harley and the Joker. They forget about Morticia and Gomez. This couple, I'm telling you, they are so supportive of each other. They are caring. They're respectful, affectionate. Some serious relationship goals.
Absolutely. Like they're always like verbally bolstering each other. Yes. They're always, hey, you know, that's okay. You're fantastic. You're phenomenal. Keep trying. Keep going. We'll get there. And it's that kind of ongoing verbal support they give to one another that's incredible.
And ongoing gratitude. Like, I can't undersell the importance of showing gratitude in a relationship and saying, I am thankful for you doing this, or I am thankful for you doing that, and just having that gratitude. And this couple is absolutely one that shows gratitude for each other on a routine basis. It's fantastic.
You know, gratitude, oftentimes I've heard, is an antidote for entitlement. Mm-hmm. When couples become entitled to each other and entitled to each other's labor and work, and, well, I'm entitled to have you love me, and it's like I have that entitlement and I have that expectation that you are just going to love me forever. I'm not going to have to put any effort into it. You know, gratitude is the opposite of that. Gratitude is, wow, my life is enriched because of your willingness to participate. You are voluntarily giving me love and affection. And so I voluntarily give you that same love and affection. It's what really makes a marriage work. It's that engine that drives us, is that gratitude.
Very much. So my next example is When Harry Met Sally. This movie is not always the greatest example of healthy relationships through the entire movie. But what it does show is the evolution of a strong friendship that evolves into a relationship. And overall, the relationship that develops in this movie is a slow burn. It isn't fireworks and fantastic special effects. It is very slow to develop, and there's a ton of open, honest communication, and the characters are not afraid to be vulnerable with each other. The couple doesn't rush into a relationship. There's no love at first sight stuff. Like, we're not looking at Eric and Ariel here. This is they're friends for a long, long time before they ever get together. And they slowly fall in love with who the person really is without having any illusions of that. Because there's a thing where sometimes people fall in love with their idea of what the other person is, rather than the real concept of who that person really is. And we partially, when we start dating, we have all these masks up. Like, I want her to think I'm funny, or I want him to think I'm fun. And so we put up all these masks, and especially with online dating, and we put all these things out there of how we want the other person to perceive us, even if those aren't always 100% honest. I see or I hear people talking all the time about traveling, and I read a lot of dating forums, and they'll be talking about how all these people put all this traveling stuff on there, and how they want somebody that's been to all these places and done all these things and is sporty and exciting, and that's wonderful. But there are people that are buying into this in order to, or putting this on their profile in order to attract somebody like that, when that's not always 100% honest of who they really are as a person.
Right. I think that the facade that we put on, that kind of veneer on the front, doesn't really... I mean, honestly, it takes time to see through the veneer. Mm-hmm. It takes time to see who someone really is. Who, you know, what they represent, what their values are, what their beliefs are, because oftentimes you don't discover someone's values until something happens that causes those values to appear. Okay, so my values are, I love to go travel. Okay, I guess that's cool. I mean, if that's what you're into, great. But really, what is the value? What are your values? Do you believe in being honest? Mm-hmm. Do you believe in being respectful in a relationship? Do you believe in consent?
Right.
Do you believe it? So there's all these questions that you can't get from a profile. It's basically based on infatuation, first looks, and then you see if you want to go on a date, and then you see what the person's really like. And hopefully you date them over time to really get to know what their values are.
And that's why I read these dating forums, is to kind of keep up with what the dating environment is like now. And so that's the complaint that I'm reading a lot about and seeing a lot about, is that people are not feeling that the individuals are representing themselves authentically, and that they're putting up these fronts and they're trying to present themselves almost like, think of it like a filter, like when we filter our photos.
Yeah.
And so it's almost like a filter on their personality, and they're leaving out the real authentic parts, like you talked about. Is this person honest? Is this person loyal? Is this person this thing? And they're just talking about these various signals of, hey, I want somebody that does this and does that, to try to make themselves more exciting and be more alluring to the opposite sex or the same gender.
Yeah, do you know what's interesting is like everybody says, I love camping and fishing and going outdoors. But then like you find out they haven't gone hiking or fishing or camping in a year or two. Yes. That doesn't mean you love going hiking and fishing. I mean, unless you've been in a wheelchair from a car accident, you're probably not as big in or into it as that seems. But everybody says they love it. But who really actually likes to hike? There are days that I love it. There are days that I don't. I love hiking in the fall. I don't like hiking in Missouri in the middle, right after a rainstorm in 110-degree weather. I feel like I want to die.
Absolutely.
Or that I'm going to drown by walking outside in the air.
Right. In the fall or spring, I'm out there like almost every weekend. But in the summer and the winter,
Yeah, actually, I would rather camp in negative temperatures than camp in 110-degree weather in muggy Missouri, because I can always put more on, but at some point you can only get so naked, and you're still not cooling off. You're like, well, I'm just going to die out here. And so, like in the summertime, in the wintertime, you can put on a mummy bag and be toasty warm.
Right.
And so I think that, do I love hiking and camping? Yes, as long as it's not in the summer. Which is kind of weird. It's kind of the opposite of how most people are.
Well, and the complaints I'm seeing is some people will put stuff like on like that on their profiles, and then turn around and it's been that they haven't gone hiking and done any of these things in years. And so then it comes down to, can you really say that you like doing this thing and put it as the primary things on your profile when you haven't engaged in those activities in a very long time?
Right. I think what's interesting is that when you're trying to find out whether you're compatible with someone or not, it's almost as important to see the things that they omit as the things that they sincerely put down. Because there's so many things that people omit from knowledge. I had this one friend of mine introduced to me their husband, and the things they omitted was that he had been incarcerated for 20 years. I was like, wow, so I had this person over, this bank robber over at my house, and they were around my children. And you didn't inform me that they, had this extensive criminal record. Thanks. And so we're not so close as friends anymore. And but it's that omission that causes us to have the relationship problems.
Well, generally those omissions are not accidental. Usually they're because they know it's a big deal.
Yeah, absolutely. And so once you find out someone's omitting something, it's like, oh, this is deeper than you're letting me know about. There's something really deeper there, and that oftentimes speaks to people's character.
Absolutely. So the next one is Mark and Bridget from Bridget Jones's Diary. And notice a theme here. None of the examples I've given have been like major highlights. None of these were like people that just instantly met and fell in love. Bridget and Mark was not the exciting one. The next one, since I really gave a hard time to some old school Disney stuff last time, let's bring up The Princess and the Frog. And this couple is more honest than most Disney couples because they really don't like each other when the movie starts.
Right.
Really don't like each other. And they grow to initially be friends, gain respect for each other, and through the course of the movie eventually fall in love through getting to know each other, which is far more realistic than looking at somebody 50 yards away and deciding that they're the love of your life. And my last example is Rosemary and Dill from Easy A. You probably don't know who I'm talking about here, but it's the parents of the main character. And every time I watch that movie, I get completely just enamored with the love relationship between these two. They have such a fantastic back and forth, witty, but very, very supportive. They're fun and funny, and they flirt with each other all the time. So there's a lot of that non-sexual touching going on. They're great parents, and they're supportive of each other as well as their daughter. And their easy back and forth is just really fantastic. So after I finish this, I've got a few that I wanted to add as honorable mentions. And first would be Jamie and Paul from Mad About You.
Yes, that's a good show.
There's an episode where Jamie kisses another man, and Paul has to kind of cope with that. And them talking that out is fantastic. Wonderful couple, very supportive of each other, and they're able to have some tough conversations. Another one, you had brought up Anna and Hans from Frozen.
Yeah, that she gets caught up with the stupid idiot prince guy who's like 12th in line or something like that. Mm-hmm. And the only way he was going to become a king is if he took over someone else's kingdom. And so he played her, but then like she found out what a jerk he was. I had some other names come to mind, but he found out what a jerk he was, and then she ends up with the ice delivery boy, Hans, and it's a much better relationship. They're friends. You know, he seems like he's a lot more responsible and mature.
The last one that I want to highlight is from the new girl, Jess and Nick. And that relationship went through seasons upon seasons of will they, won't they. They're literally best friends through most of the relationship. And they go through a lot of unhealthy behaviors because they're surrogate partners for each other, as a best friend, they are filling the significant other role for the other person, so the other person's dysfunctional relationship can keep going. Like, it's basically the other person, maybe they can't talk, or maybe they can't do this, or they can't count on that person, and then that person, either Nick or Jess, in whichever situation they happen to be in, provide that support, provide that ability to talk things out, sometimes even serve as a buffer between that person and the person they're in a relationship with. And that part is extremely dysfunctional, but when they're together, it's wonderful. They accept each other's weirdness. They really deeply understand and respect each other.
Awesome. Well, these have been some really good relationships. Not always perfect, but it's the imperfections oftentimes that demonstrate what a good relationship looks like. Mm-hmm. So thank you for sharing your list with us. I really appreciate that.
Okay. Well, thank you guys, and have a great day.
See you next time.
For more information about mental health and wellness, contact Student Wellbeing at 204 Norwood Hall. And you can also give us a call at 573-341-4211.
The song Happy Days is brought to us by music from www.free-stock-music.com. You can also add and follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook using our handle @S&T Wellbeing.